Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. We could probably all have an answer for this. Let's do it. What's the scariest experience you've had that you cannot explain? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Back in middle school, I ended up home alone on a Halloween night because I had gotten grounded. It was kinda late, and I was feeling scared and lonely, so I went looking for my pet bunny. He used to run around the house freely, so I went down the hall looking for him. When I reached the end of the hall, I saw something black peeking behind the kitchen counter. Since my bunny was black, I thought I had found him, so I went to go grab him, but it wasn't even him. What I saw was a black shadow-like thing hovering over the entire kitchen floor. It was only a few inches above the ground. At that moment, I was more confused and scared, so I walked towards it, and it backed away from me until it disappeared. Then the fear finally kicked in, and I ran. A few years ago, I was on my way to catch the bus to get to school. I saw one of my neighbors, really grumpy old guy, as he walked right past me. He had this big smile on his face, which never happens. I looked back at him, and he was already like 30 feet away. It seemed weird, but I haven't thought about it too much. Later that day, I get home and talk to my mom about how our days went, and I mentioned the small interaction I had with our neighbor, just for her to tell me that he passed away the previous night. The chills down my spine have never been stronger. I've always said and maintained that if there are areas of paranormal activity in this world, that hospitals would be right near the top of that list for me. This might be a bit long and difficult to word in English, so apologies if there are any mistakes. I am disabled and spent a lot of my childhood in hospital, got surgery to improve my quality of life in 2008, and had to spend like over a year in the hospital every day. There were a lot of other kids there, some who would be spending even the weekends in hospital, and others would get to go home for the weekends, come back Monday, spend the week there, repeat. There were a lot of sick kids there, obviously, with various illnesses and disabilities. There was one girl in particular, let's call her Judy, who was in a power chair, unable to move or talk. She did vocalize though, and over time you could recognize her vocalizing from afar, if that makes sense. One time, a Friday, a friend and I were waiting for our ambulances to come and pick us up to get us home for the weekend. Friday afternoon was staff meeting time, so my friend and I were just in our room waiting alone, which was not unusual. What was weird though was that we could hear Judy wailing, not just vocalizing, full-on wailing, like pained screams and sobs. It went on for maybe 2 hours. Nobody came to check on her, and when our ambulances came, the people picking us up didn't seem to notice anything either. My friend and I were worried though, so we agreed to mention it to a nurse when we came back on Monday. Monday rolls around. Friends and I talk and decide to go tell a nurse, hey, Judy seemed pretty agitated on Friday, and we didn't see anyone to ask to check on her. Is she feeling better? The nurse turned white. I remember her just staring at us for a second, and then just telling us yeah, she's okay, don't worry. Go back to whatever the communal activity was that day. Friend and I thought she reacted a bit weird, but hey, we're kids in hospital struggling with our own health. An adult says she's fine, we go back to our own thing. We don't see Judy after that, but don't think much of it. Years later, we learned that she'd apparently passed a day or two before. My friend and I apparently heard her. Still don't know what to think of this now as an adult. I just hope she's at peace now. I was in Italy and walking through a small market. It was very full, and many people walked toward us. There was one guy who was like a head taller than everyone, wearing dark clothes and had darker skin. He had his head bent down, but because I'm short, I could see his face perfectly. He had the widest grin I've ever seen. The moment I put my eyes on him, I felt the most intense fear, like something instinctual had been triggered in me. He was walking directly toward me, and all I could think about was that surely, the moment we were at the same height, he would grab and stab me. I stepped to the side, into a group of tourists. As he walked past, he was chuckling. His face didn't change. It was like no one had noticed him. His clothes were so different from everyone else. He had so much taller. He had such a scary aura around him, but no one noticed. My dad hadn't even noticed that I had stopped walking. The moment the guy passed me, I felt fine again. It was like a sepia filter had been removed from my surroundings. It was like the moment I looked at him, everything else got turned out, like in a movie. I never had anything like that happen again, but every now and then, I do have nightmares of people following me at a quick pace. A few years back, I was drinking at a friend's. Couldn't drive home, so I slept on the couch. I had a strange dream that I had saved a young boy from being hit by a truck just down the road from my friend's house. When I woke up, a young boy had been hit and killed by a truck in the exact spot that I had dreamed of. I had night terrors for the first time approximately 5 years of my life. Sometimes the dreams themselves wouldn't be scary, but in reality I would be screaming and crying while not being able to be woken up. One of the dreams was from when I was really, really young, like still couldn't talk young. I remember all of them, specifically a reoccurring dream where it is nothing but my own consciousness observing what I can only describe as geometric, mostly spherical shapes. The shape is tied to my emotions, and the surface is constantly changing. It would periodically go between smooth to having what I could only describe as a ferrofluid-like texture while moving, and for some reason, when it became like that, it was absolutely terrifying. On top of this, I was being slingshot back and forth between perspectives. I can only describe it as the sphere is at the size of a planet, and I'm floating in space, and then it would change the size to, let's say, a tennis ball floating in space in front of me. The size itself wouldn't change, but the feeling of the scale would change. Like, imagine you're an astronaut and you have a tennis ball. You float it in front of you, and from your perspective, the same size as the Earth. But you know it isn't. For me, the sphere is both astronomically massive and small at the same time, and I'm constantly sling shooting between the two perspectives while the surface is changing and causing me to feel things based on how crazy the surface is. That is my best attempt to describe this cosmic horror my baby brain was exposed to. One Friday night, I have a cold. I was up late watching a TV show about a guy who had his identity wiped and was being chased by some shadowy organization. I took a cold pill before the show started and went to bed after the show ended. An hour later, I wake up in bed unable to move, and I see shadows of people going past my door like they're searching my living room. Once in a while, one of these shadows leans in through the bedroom doorway and looks at me to see if I'm sleeping. My eyes are open, but I can't move. I try to scream, but just a whimper comes out. When I was 9, I was playing with a friend in the front car park of our swim club. There was a loud bang on the busy street close to us. We ran over and saw papers scattered on the road and a woman lying there. I look up the street and see a girl I trained with in her cozy, looking round the corner at the commotion, smiling and pulling her hair behind her ear. We keep watching the panic unfold, and it was her mom and sister lying unconscious on the road some 10 meters apart, and her, dead, with blood gushing from her ear on the road as well. It was a hit and run. Her mom and sister survived. That poor family. I was driving home with my daughter, who was about 3 at the time. We were driving past Bushland when she started recounting a story of how she remembers being in there and being scared that wolves were coming, that they would get her, and she was just so cold and scared. She'd never watched anything like this. We don't have wolves in Australia, so no idea where any of it came from. Bloody kids and scary enough without creepy retelling of sad, scary stories. One night I was sleeping in my bed, draped over my body pillow. I woke up, rolled over on my back, and looked at my closet door. It swung open and out stepped what looked like a very old woman, like 80s old, wearing a white nightgown. We just stared at each other for a few seconds. My defense mechanism, being extremely tired, made me lean back on my side, cuddle my body pillow, and go back to sleep. Later that night, I wake up, roll on my back, and look to my closet. The door swings open, and out steps the same woman. Again, I roll back to my side and go back to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and processed what happened. Noticed the exact same thing happened twice, down to how I was laying. I was freaked out and rearranged my bedroom. Never happened again. No idea if it was a sleep paralysis thing or what. Never seen that woman before, as far as I know. That was many years ago. A few months ago, I had sleep paralysis. I'd never had it before, so this was a completely novel experience for me. I woke up, or so I thought, and it felt like someone had gotten into bed with me and was lying on top of me. I was terrified because I lived alone and knew there shouldn't have been anyone there. I couldn't even move to turn my head to see who or what was on top of me. Then, whatever it was, picked me up fireman style and carried me out of my bedroom. The whole time I couldn't move or speak and felt completely at the mercy of whatever this was. Thankfully, I woke up for real shortly after it picked me up. I felt what I can only describe as a pop in my brain while I was watching TV one day. My thoughts were scrambled for a few minutes, and then for weeks after, I was getting intense head pressure and migraines. I had a panic attack when it all became too much, and eventually I got an MRI. The scans looked normal, and doctors had no advice for me. The headaches eventually went away, and to this day I have no explanation for what that was. I think I remember reading in the comments that there are other commenters that have experienced auditory hallucinations. Have you? And was this description accurate, or is yours a little different? Anyone else get auditory hallucinations during sleep paralysis? It hasn't happened in years, but I'd get a loud sound of radio static, tuning stations, and then hear music that I did not recognize, but was clearly mainstream music. Very loud, like headphones were placed on my ears. The most terrifying was the whispering voice when the music stopped, saying, "My name. I know you're scared. I know this is confusing. Shh. Silence." Took me years to get over that, and now it's just something that happened that I can never explain. Happened in college about 20 years ago. Drugs not involved. I woke up in the night, my heart racing, unable to catch my breath. My eyes felt like tunnel vision, like I was getting further from the light and was close to passing out. I'd been laying down, but I woke up in a jolted sitting position. I tried to reach for my phone to call my parents, but I couldn't get my phone. My arm was so weak, and the light was further than ever, and I was so scared. Then everything started clearing, and I caught my breath and got my phone and called my mom. She came to my home, and by the time she got there, I was okay. Turns out, I don't just have panic attacks awake anymore. The depression meds help a lot, and the ADHD meds help a lot during the day, but even still, every now and then, I still panic in my sleep and wake up to that hell. I'm now in therapy. My story starts in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I grew up in this state, New Mexico. This place has always had more than its fair share of spooky stuff, from Roswell to Route 666. Name now changed. It wouldn't be hard to find someone who had an encounter of sorts. So, growing up, I lived with my mother and my babysitter in a place called the South Valley. The reasons for this and the subsequent events that followed are another horror story unto itself. The babysitter had 2 adult kids and 3 grandkids there too. One of them was named Dustin. Now, this guy was a metalhead in all senses of the word. We're talking 80s Iron Maiden, Metallica. All the big names are fresh to the scene. Bullying and fights for being a metalhead was an everyday occurrence for this dude. May seem unimportant, but this dude wasn't scared of shit. I was 10 or 11 at the time. We'd go out, get food from the local fast food joints nearby regularly. Our road went right by an old mud arroyo ditch. You could continue straight or walk along the dirt path besides the arroyo. This path would lead to the backside of a Burger King, and beside the landlord's house, unless we really wanted BK, we'd avoid this route for 2 reasons. 1, because the landlord was always watching out his window, and 2, due to being a small irrigation bridge for the family down the road. You could walk on the bridge if you needed to. It was just a foot in front of foot, while holding the one rail it had kind of walk, slip, and you'll fall in. One night we wanted BK, so we went. It's about 9:40ish p.m. He wanted to go at closing because they'd hook us up with more food. With him being my senior by 7 years, I figured he knew what was best. We got our food, 2 bags each, and decided to go back via the bridge path since it was shorter. Now, in the valley, we'd get blue moons, a full moon that made the whole place look blue. That night was one. Dustin crossed first, then me. He was about 5 feet ahead of me. We heard something splash, and he turned to look if it was me. I see him go white, full-fledged panic mode. All he says is, "Run." Then he drops the food and bolts. The SV was known to be a rough area. I figured he'd seen someone behind me that was gonna mug us or something. I hurry. My foot slips in the water, regain myself, and get to the dirt path, running to catch him. I'm about where he was initially. When I turn back to look, all I can see is a bright white light on the bridge. Now, I know it ain't no bicycle, nor can it be someone with a flashlight, too steady and fast. My turn to drop food and run like hell. I catch up to Dustin, and we get inside the house. I dive on the couch in the living room, and he goes to his room. About 10 minutes later, someone is pounding on the door. I'm freaking out. The oldest kid goes and answers it. The landlord, Ray, standing there in his underwear, angry as can be. He swears that Dustin was looking in his bedroom window. He knows it was him because the person had long hair. He goes on to say he was holding a flashlight to illuminate himself so he could try and scare Ray and his wife by moaning and crying. Ryan, oldest kid, said he dealt with it. Closed door, said, "What the F did you guys do?" I tried to explain. He just said, "Ditch Witch? La Yorna? Was after you?" I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Never walked that bridge again. So that's it. I know it's a hell to read. TL. DR. I got chased by La Yorna for some greasy BK food. Now, here's a post that I can actually identify with. I've had dreams where my emotion in that transferred into my real life and mourning, from joy to anger to sadness. Have you ever experienced that? Woke up feeling a nasty level of hatred in the in-between sleep and awake, and could hear myself talking. I seemed absolutely angry with someone because I spoke with such venom, asking them if they really wanted a war. It was scary because I dreamt of it a few times after, and each time I'm some sort of warrior, and a female warrior are in a forest. It's raining, and the same thing unfolds, but her face never is visible, and I'm a level of angry I've never felt at her.